so funny because everybody here knows this. My name is Steve Ulfelder. Yes, Mom?
Microphone?
There is no microphone here.
Oh, all right, talk louder.
Okay, sorry about that. I will. You know what I'll do? I know what I'll do.
Move it up.
I'll move it up. Or maybe I don't even know. All right, so I'll talk louder, and I moved up towards you. My name is Steve Ulfelder, and as you all know, we're here to launch the second Conway Sax novel titled The Whole Lie, follow-on to Purgatory Chasm, which I'm pleased to say was nominated for Best First Mystery by Mystery Writers of America, and it was named Best First Mystery by RT Book Reviews, which was quite an honor. I want to thank the folks here at Tatnut Booksellers. We are very lucky to live 10 minutes away from such a great independent bookseller. Truly appreciate the beautiful presentation they put on here tonight. And I want to thank all of you for coming out on a school night. I know some are wrestling with their school-age children in the puzzle section. Others are drawing cartoons. Anyway, and I know that some people have to leave fairly soon, so I just decided to get going here. The Whole Lie, a lot of people say that your second novel is the hardest novel to sell and might be the most important novel you ever write. My second published novel, The Whole Lie, came about in an interesting way. I sold Purgatory Chasm to a very young editor at Thomas Dunn Books in Minotaur. It was the first book she ever bought. It was the first book I ever sold. And so she was given a short leash to buy books. She did not, was not given the opportunity to give me a 2-book deal, which is pretty common among first novelists. Then the book got into the hands of the publisher and started getting passed around, and I'm happy to say there was a strong positive reaction to it within the publisher, and they authorized this editor of mine to offer me a second book deal. So my agent called me one day, oh my gosh, I can't even remember when it was, and she said, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is Minotaur wants to buy another book. The bad news is you've got 5 months to write it. Fortunately, I had a start on the thing already, but I did have to really buckle down and get the thing done. I got a great edit from, as I say, my wonderful editor, and here we are, book 2. Now let me tell you something about the setting for this novel. It's a little bit different. Many of you know, but not all of you, that while Purgatory Chasm was the first published Conway Sax novel, to me, it was actually the third one. I had written 2 books. Neither one of them sold. I wrote Purgatory Chasm. It did sell. The reason I mention this is that Conway Sax and this whole universe had been evolving for several years by the time anybody else saw him on the shelves. Conway lives in Framingham, and as those of you who have read the book or books know, they're set largely in Metro West. Conway lives in Framingham. His girlfriend lives in Shrewsbury. Westborough's in there. Marlborough's in there. Hopkinton's in several of the books. And I like that. I still like it. But the publisher said to me one time, he said, you know, is there any way you can see Conway playing on a bigger stage? And I thought that was a pretty reasonable question, especially because as these books moved along, I realized that although Framingham is a lot more interesting than many people understand, it's pretty small. And there are only so many gritty settings you can come up with in Framingham. You do the railroad tracks, you do the Salvation Army, you do the halfway houses, and then you start cycling through them again because there's nothing else there. So I thought, well, what if I could set a book in Boston? And for some reason, I had a book about a political scandal rolling around in my head. There are plenty of political scandals to go around, but I think the specific one that was in the news at the time was the John Edwards scandal, which is is not to say the whole lie is specifically based on that. It's not. So here I was, ready to write this book, and it centered around political scandal, a gubernatorial scandal in Boston in the run-up to an election. And so that gave me an opportunity to write more about Beacon Hill and Cambridge and some of the really fancier areas of Boston, because naturally these politicians in the book are quite wealthy. The editors were very pleased that I did this with the setting. They love a book set in a big city. And let me give you a very quick plot rundown. Conway Sax, protagonist, is minding his own business, working on cars in his garage, which is fairly new and is very successful. And along comes Savannah Kane, who is an absolute femme fatale. When she enters, what I always had in my head, does anybody remember Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And Jessica Rabbit, boom, 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 boom. And that's kind of what I pictured for Savannah Kane. She's a heartbreaker all the way. And several years ago, we learned, she had a torrid affair with Conway, and then she promptly asked for his help relocating. You'll learn why in the course of the book. She wants to blackmail a man who's running for lieutenant governor of Massachusetts, a hard-charging businessman named Bert Saginaw. She wants Conway's help with the blackmail plot. That's not what Conway does, but he feels very strongly about helping his fellow alcoholics, which this woman is. And so that's how we get involved in this whole gubernatorial blackmail scandal. And we're in Boston, and we're in Cambridge, and the whole reason I wanted to talk about setting a little bit is that the very brief passage I'm going to read, I know only a couple of you in this room have read the book, and I'm very interested afterwards to see if you caught this. I suspect very few people do. But the other thing that intersects with this whole story is that during the writing of this book, the great Robert Parker passed away, author of the Spencer series. And I have to tell you, we were all very sad, of course. Everybody was sad. Everybody who loves to read, everybody who loves mysteries was very sad. But I'll tell you, Spencer owned Boston, and he especially owned the ritzier sections of Boston. And when Parker passed away, I felt I honestly felt freer. I felt new license to write a book that was set in some of the swanker areas of downtown in Cambridge. And that brings us to the reading, and here's why. There's a very quick scene. It's not even a scene. It's just the introduction to a scene that takes place in Cambridge. I believe I do say that this takes, I don't specifically say in the book, but it's in the Porter Square area. It's a street that runs into Mass Ave, for those of you who are familiar with these haunts. And what this is my little tip of the cap to Robert Parker's hawk. I bet nearly everybody in this room is familiar with this. Is this ringing a bell for those of you who read the book? Okay. So here's what I'm going to read. This scene connects to nothing else in the book. Is the right glasses or the wrong glasses? Those are the wrong glasses. Old guy, 2 pairs of glasses. This scene connects to nothing else in the book, and this was my little to Robert Parker. All right, so Conway, who is blue collar on his best day, finds himself in one of the really nicer Cambridge streets that runs into Mass Ave. And he goes like this. Finally, I made it to Cambridge. Among the Priuses and Minis, my F-150 was a mastodon. I lucked into a parking spot and walked. I was looking for an address on the right side of the street, but something to my left, a vibe, made my head swivel that way. A black dude leaned on the hood of a British Racing Green Jaguar XJ6. Shaved head, shades, turtleneck and jeans that he wore like a seal wears its skin. He was perfectly still, perfectly relaxed. He looked down the slight hill toward Massachusetts Avenue, the main drag. Maybe he was waiting for somebody, or maybe not. He didn't turn my way, didn't acknowledge me. I was there. I finally spotted a house, then we go, Conway meets this other, oh, okay, pardon me. I finally spotted a house with the right street number, looked over my shoulder a few times as I made my way toward it. I wasn't sure why, but it seemed like a good idea to know where that dude was at all times. Then he introduces himself to this woman, and he talks her into having a chat with him in a coffee shop. And he says, and they start walking back towards Mass Ave. I'd like to talk to you for a sec, I said, as she began a fast walk that would, in 30 seconds or so, dump us into Mass Ave. The black dude and his Jag were gone. And that's it. That's, that doesn't connect to anything else. That's just me going like this to Robert Parker and Spencer and Hawk. And as many of, thank you, Jimmy. There's one guy clapping back there. As many of you probably know, there's a fine writer named Ace Atkins who is actually continuing to write Spencer novels, and apparently doing a damn good job of it. The first one just came out. But still, it's not quite the same, as we all know. So that's about all I've got for you. I do want to add one more very happy note. Several months ago, in something that happened shortly after the Edgar nomination, the publisher bought 2 more Conway Sax novels. So Conway and I are in business till at least 2014 with a new pair of books. Book 3, which is titled Shotgun Lullaby, is due to my editor in about 2 weeks, and so I am sweating bullets on that right now. And that's all I've got for you. I want to thank you again for coming, and I want to ask if anybody has questions about writing process, about any of the books you've read or haven't read. Ray?
So you've been hanging around with this Conway Sax guy for a long time.
Yeah.
What do you like about him? Why is he still someone you like to write about?
Oh gosh, boy, the relationship between author and first-person narrator in a series is so complicated, and I've heard so many interesting things said about it. I think Dashiell Hammett, or somebody was asked about it, somebody said to Dashiell Hammett or somebody, are you your protagonist? And he said, no, I'm not, but he's me.
Yeah.
And I think Robert Parker just came out and said, yeah, Spencer's me, but taller. So there are all sorts of different takes on that. You know, there's a certain amount of wish fulfillment about your first-person protagonist. All the cool things that Conway Sax does are things that I don't do. He's fearless, he's big, he's tough, he knows how to handle himself in a fight. He never walks away from anything except by choice. So I love that about Conway. I also like the way he has softened up as the series has moved along. Conway's a tough guy, but if you think he's a tough guy now, you should have seen him in the earlier books that haven't been published. He was absolutely a missile, and he was tight, he was all inside, and he wouldn't even share his thoughts with the reader. Well, as you can imagine, that's not necessarily somebody you want to spend 300 pages with. And so as the series progressed and as I got better at doing these things, I found ways to soften him up without softening him too much, I think. Abby?
Well, I, being your sister, know that you have already written a previous copy of Shotgun Lullaby.
Yep.
I know that it was your first novel.
Yes, yep.
And now that you've written through and had published another couple of novels, have you gone back to that novel and gone through it?
Absolutely.
And edited it?
When I speak and present, and when I inform people that I wrote 2 Conway Sax novels before I had one published, probably the #1 question I hear is, what about those earlier novels? Are you ever going to circle back to those? And I understand why people ask those questions, because a novel is a year of your time. A novel is a very large endeavor, and it shocks people sometimes that you can put that much of yourself into something and not, quote, get anything out of it. tangible. And for a long time, my honest answer to that was, no, you know, those two novels were what they were, and I'm moving on and I'm pressing forward. What happened with Shotgun Lullaby, which was the first Conway Sax novel that didn't get published, I was talking with my agent in the wake of The Whole Lie, and we were kicking ideas around, and I was telling her this and that. She said, what about Shotgun Lullaby? She said, I love that book. She said, you know, what if you treated that book, that existing manuscript, like a framework and took everything you've learned in the 5 years since and rewrote that book? And I thought, gosh, I think you're right about that. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm done with the bulk of that. As I say, in 2 weeks, that has to go to my editor. And the funny thing is, it is just as hard rewriting a novel, if you really rewrite it, as it is writing a brand spanking fresh one. Here's what happens. The beginning of the novel, things don't change that much, but they start to change. And it's like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. And by the time you get to the last third or the last quarter of the novel, everything is so different that you're absolutely just writing a fresh novel anyway. So it's hard work, but I think it was a strong enough premise and a strong enough book to merit this kind of thing. Ruth?
Do you ever feel that your protagonist controls you instead of you controlling him?
No, I
No.
wish. Yeah.
I didn't know if kind of took over on occasion.
No, some people, you know what's funny is a lot of writers talk about their characters doing things that surprise them, that the writer doesn't expect. There's a lot of, I would almost say there's a lot of controversy about that in the fiction world. I fall on the side that says, well, you know, that sounds nice to say, but the fact is you're making this stuff up. It's all coming out of your head, so you better be in control of what your characters do, so, yeah. Abby?
How long do you think you'll be writing about Conway Sax, and when do you think you'll start another?
Well, I know when I'll start another. I'll start another in August. I'll send this one off to my editor June 1st, Shotgun Lullaby, that is. She'll get it back to me sometime in June or early July. The revisions may be extensive, but when I saw the revisions for The Whole Lie, I almost passed out. It was a 12-page, single-spaced letter, and it was not gentle. And so I worked my tail off, making all the changes my editor requested. Not all of them, you know, it's a cooperative endeavor. And I sent it back to her and I said, woo! A couple weeks later, I got back a 9-page single-spaced letter. So I said, okay, I'm moving in the right direction. Anyway, the edits may be substantial or they may be fairly light, as they were for Purgatory Chasm. But then I'll take a month to collapse, which I will desperately need, and then my next deadline for book 4 is the last day of March 2013. So I get that block of time to write the next book.
But do you know when you'll start writing another character, like another
Oh, I see what you're saying.
protagonist?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I understand why writers who are best known for one character decide to make a change and do something else. But I also understand that when you're best known for your series character, it can be hard to break away from that, and there's a lot of pressure from the publisher to continue with that as long as you're successful. If I went to my publisher right now and I said, say, I've got a great idea for a thriller that has nothing to do with Conway Sax, they don't want to hear about it. They want Conway Sax. So we'll see. I think there must be a right time to make that kind of change. Let me thank you again for coming. Oh, David.
What was the process for receiving the Edgar nomination, and what effect does that have on your career?
Oh, it had a huge effect. You publish these novels, and you're queen for a day, basically. You know, you get your party like this, and all your friends and family, and it's lovely. And if you're fortunate, you get some strong reviews, and everybody tells you how great you are. then the wheel turns and the machine keeps grinding, which is difficult to understand when you publish your first novel. The publishing industry is in quite a bit of turmoil right now. There's all sorts of change going on. But it's a great time to be a reader because there are more books than ever published. I mean, something like 100,000 a year just from legitimate major publishers. The reason I say that is things just move along, and all of a sudden you're not the king of the scene anymore. And 90 days pass and your book's no longer on the shelves at Barnes and Noble, and nobody's talking about you anymore, and they're all talking about the next wonder kid. So to receive that nomination, especially almost a full year, I guess, after the book was published, was just very gratifying because that's voted on by fellow mystery writers, and it means quite a bit within the industry. Sales of the book took a spike. It was shortly after that nomination that they asked for 2 more books, so it's just been an incredibly positive thing, and for the whole rest of my life, doesn't matter what I write, how lousy it is, I get to be an Edgar-nominated author. Anything else?
No, someone's already asked this question, but how do you, and if so, I apologize for being late. Do you, between hardcover textbooks versus, ebooks,
Yep.
and as a writer, how do you sort of see the two? And but sort of as a reader and on the business side.
As a reader, I like them. I like them all, frankly. And the funny thing is, I don't. When I first got my Kindle, I thought my Kindle was going to completely blow away any hard copy books. I thought I would never buy one again. But it hasn't worked out that way for various reasons. There just seems, for me anyway, and you're all readers, and I bet most of you have some sort of e-reader, even if it's your cell phone. There just seems to be a right time for each one, and it's hard to explain why. Your Kindle, you can make that impulse purchase. You're sitting in your living room and you go bing, 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 and now you own a book. Anyway, but so as a reader, I'm just the same as everybody in this room probably, this month.
Is it accurate that your agent sold the rights for audio books?
Oh, thank you for asking
I
that.
think
Yes.
that's huge.
Not only did she sell them, but they just became available. Both books are available on audible.com as of last night, actually. Now, the funny thing is, maybe I'm just an old guy here, but I downloaded one, and I had typical, not this computer, I need the other computer, and I can't get it downloaded, and it wants me to do this. It wasn't as simple as I thought it would be to download an audio book, but I did manage to download one. And Martha and I started listening to one, and it's very funny because, the reader, I had no input whatsoever into who read these things. Stephen King gets to pick who reads his books. I don't get to pick who reads my books. And the guy who read it, I'm sure is a pro, and I'm sure he's done this 1,000 times, but he to me, sounded like Captain Kirk reading one of my books. She walked into my shop and I dropped a muffler. It was like something from the Simpsons imitating Captain Kirk. But it's very cool to hear your book on tape like that. So yes, those of you who enjoy audiobooks, you can get both of mine.
Can I get them in just a nice little package like this?
Like a CD? I don't think so. I think you have to download it and do the CD yourself,
Okay.
as far as I
Your
know.
son-in-law can do it for you.
Or your grandson.
My grandson, I was thinking,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Or your son, his Tom.
How do you determine the length of the book you're going to write? Do you determine a length and write to it, or does the idea reach a certain length? And the reason I ask is that as someone who's read many authors who have developed series around characters like Conway Sax, you're disappointed when it's over too soon. You want to, and you and I talked about this, how 400 pages tends to be a very desirable length in terms of being excited about buying it, settling in, and really living with that character for a period of time.
Yeah. You know what? there is sort of an industry standard. I think when people buy a book, especially a hardcover book for $24.99, I just get the feeling they want 300 pages anyway. Does that seem right to people? I mean, if you spend 25 bucks on a hardcover, no, don't you kind of want more than 175 pages? I don't know, I do. So, and this is completely, I've never heard this said by anybody in the industry. It's more a feeling I have that, thank you, Ruth, that 75,000 words, which comes out to 300 pages, is a very appropriate minimum length for a mystery novel. Does that seem right to you, Ray? Yeah. And then in different, and it sort of goes up from there. Thriller, if you're talking about thrillers, you know, military type stuff, now you're up at 400 pages plus. So yes, there is an unofficial industry-approved norm that says probably 75,000 to 100,000 words is a good sweet spot for how long a novel is. And you know, that's one area in which I think the ebook revolution is a very positive thing. I think one of the things that happens there is that you break that tyranny, that idea that you're spending 25 bucks for hardcover, so you need to write 75,000 words. And if you've got a 60,000 word novel, and you're pricing it fairly, and you're informing people that it's 60,000 words rather than 80,000 words, I think that's one of the cool things you can do in electronic publishing. And the funny thing is, you know, some people, you've got overwriters and underwriters, not in the insurance sense, but some people write big and they have to cut things down. Some people write short and they have to fill up the space. I'm an underwriter. You know, anybody who's read my stuff, you know how terse Conway Sax can be and how short and grabby the sentences are. A lot happens in a small space. So I would like nothing better, and I think someday, I imagine I'll do this, I would like nothing better than to write a 55,000 word novel and charge $3.99 for it myself on, you know, on Amazon as an ebook only. Does that answer it? Well, are there any other questions? Thank you all so much for coming.
Is the third one?
The third one, you know what, the third one I'm sending to my editor the 1st of June, and it will be coming out next year, and there will be a fourth one too.
Oh, cool.
Conway
Good,
lives.
Steve.
Conway lives.
Please come back and have a piece of cake.
Yes, please have cake.